Sophie is 22 years old. She lives in a small but cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood of the city. Her family lives in another town, and though she loves them, Sophie enjoys her independence. Her parents, Mary and Robert, visit her sometimes, and she has an older brother, Ben, who works as an engineer. Sophie's biggest passion is painting. She spends most of her time creating landscapes, portraits, and abstract designs. Her dream is to one day open an art gallery. Apart from painting, Sophie enjoys reading old novels, listening to classical music, and taking long walks through the city's parks. She finds inspiration in the beauty of nature and the stories she reads. Sophie is curious and adventurous, always looking for something new and exciting to bring into her life. Sophie sat in her small apartment. As you knew, she was a young artist who loved painting. Her room was full of colorful paintings, but she often felt something was missing in her life. One day, while walking in the city, she saw an old shop called Timeless Treasures. It looked strange and exciting, so Sophie went inside. The shop was full of old things, books, watches, and small boxes. An old man stood behind the counter. He smiled and said, "Looking for something special?" Sophie shook her head. "I'm just looking around," she said. At the back of the shop, Sophie found a small brass box. It was very pretty with designs carved into it. She picked it up and felt something heavy inside. "That's an interesting box," the old man said, appearing beside her. "It's said to belong to a traveler who disappeared long ago." Sophie laughed. "It sounds like a story," she said. The man smiled but said no more. Sophie bought the box and took it home. When she opened it, she found a pocket watch inside. The watch looked very old, and there was a small note with it. "Press the button when the moment feels right." Sophie smiled and put the watch on her desk. She thought it was just an old toy. A few days later, Sophie was painting when she felt curious about the watch. She picked it up and pressed the black button. Suddenly, bright light filled the room. Sophie felt dizzy and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she wasn't in her apartment anymore. She was standing in a busy street. The people wore old-fashioned clothes, and the street was made of cobblestones. Sophie looked around in surprise. A kind-looking man walked up to her. "Are you lost, miss?" he asked. "Yes," Sophie said. "Where am I?" "This is London," the man said. "The year is 1853. Sophie was shocked. The watch had sent her back in time. "You seems new here. You can trust me. Let's go to my place. Tell me your story. I will try to help you." Sophie felt a mix of fear and relief as she followed Henry through the narrow streets of the old town. Everything looked so strange and different. No cars, no electricity, and people bustling about in clothes that seemed to belong in a museum. Henry led her to a cozy little house at the edge of the town. It was small but warm, with a crackling fire in the hearth and shelves filled with books. "You're safe here," he said, offering her a chair by the fire. Sophie hesitated but then sat down. "Thank you. she said softly. Henry brought her a cup of tea and asked, "Can you tell me what happened? You seem lost." Sophie looked at him, unsure of how to explain. "I don't know how to say this," she began, "but I think I've come from another time. One moment I was at home, and then everything changed. I don't belong here." Henry listened carefully, his eyes filled with curiosity and concern. "Another time? That's extraordinary," he said. "But you're here now, and I'll do everything I can to help you." Over the next few days, Henry helped Sophie adjust to life in the past. He explained the customs and introduced her to the townspeople, calling her his cousin from a distant village to avoid suspicion. He even found her a dress to blend in, which made Sophie laugh. "You look beautiful," Henry said one day, as Sophie twirled in her new dress. She blushed, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Henry showed her around the town, taking her to the market, the church, and the park. He told her stories about the place and its history, which Sophie found fascinating. She, in turn, told him about the future, about cars, airplanes, and the internet. Henry was amazed. "Your world sounds incredible," he said one evening as they sat under a tree in the park. "But I can't imagine living without the simple beauty of this life." Sophie smiled. "It's different, but there's beauty in both." As the days turned into weeks, Sophie and Henry grew closer. Henry admired Sophie's strength and curiosity, while Sophie found comfort in Henry's kindness and intelligence. They spent hours talking, laughing, and exploring together. One day, as they walked by the river, Henry took Sophie's hand. "I don't know how long you'll stay here," he said, "but I want you to know that you've made my life brighter. I've never felt this way about anyone before." Sophie's heart raced. "Henry, I feel the same, but I don't know if I can stay. What if I find a way back to my time?" Henry nodded, his expression serious. "Then I'll help you, no matter how much it hurts to let you go. I just want you to be happy." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They shared moments of joy and quiet nights under the stars. Sophie found herself torn between the world she had come from and the life she was building with Henry. One evening, as they sat by the fire in Henry's house, Sophie looked into his eyes. "I don't know what the future holds, Henry, but I know that meeting you has been the greatest adventure of my life." Henry smiled and took her hand. "No matter what happens, Sophie, you've changed my life forever." He looked at Sophie and said, "I like you, Sophie. You're special. I want to spend more time with you." Sophie smiled but felt sad. "I like you too, Henry," she said. "But I don't belong here. My home is far away. I am missing my family." "Then let's find a way to take you back," Henry said. "Will you come with me?" Sophie asked. "Yes, Sophie. I love you. I want to spend my life with you," Henry replied. They decided to try the watch again. Sophie explained how it worked. Together they pressed the button, holding hands tightly. A bright light surrounded them, and Sophie closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was back in her apartment. The watch was on the floor, but Henry was gone. Sophie searched everywhere for him. She even went back to the shop, but it wasn't there anymore. Sophie missed Henry a lot, but she started painting pictures of him in the Victorian era. She wanted to remember their time together. One day, Sophie visited a museum. She saw an old journal in a glass case. The journal belonged to a clockmaker named Henry Thompson. It told the story of a woman who came from another time. The last page said, "She was my greatest love. I hope she is happy in her world. She brought happiness to mine." Sophie cried as she read those words. She held the watch in her hand and whispered, "I will never forget you, Henry. You are my forever love." If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe, and share.